The Elder Gods, the Great Ones, the Other Gods, the Great Old Ones, the Outer Gods. There's a lot of different groups referred to in the writings of Lovecraft, and actually this is pretty innovative. While there's lots of pantheons in Earth mythology, it's not that common for multiple pantheons to show up a single nation's legend. It does happen. The Vanir aren't the same as the Aesir and North myth, but the Vanir are pretty much nameless and unworshipped. The Greeks had the Titans who ruled the world before the Olympians, but the Titans function more like monsters or enemies or heroes than gods. What you don't have is like Odin fighting Zeus, or other combinations like this. So let's discuss all these groups to try to keep in track. We're going to start with the famous Elder Gods. I say they're famous, but they're not much known. Now, Lovecraft himself in his stories only names 3 Elder Gods: Bastet, Nodens, and Hypnos. And he doesn't make it completely clear that Hypnos is an Elder God, but it does have power of some sort. Now, Bastet, of course, is an Egyptian cat goddess and is the reason that Egypt produced hundreds of thousands of mummified cats over the centuries. Almost all of these are gone now because they were used for fertilizer. Mostly by Britain. Not saying Britain is the bad guy here. I guess they were, sort of. But they were the ones that had the most contact with Egypt. I'm sure the French and Germans would have done it if they'd had the chance. Alas, for the unromantic Victorians. Sometimes I like Victorians a lot, but more often they drive me nuts. Anyway, while Bastet doesn't actually appear with prominence in a Lovecraft tale, cats do, and Lovecraft overtly stated his love for cats in his letters, so she gets to be an Elder God. Now, Nodens is the best-known one. He shows up in person in at least 2 of Lovecraft's stories. One of these is in the Dreamland, so maybe it doesn't count, but the other is in the real world in Kingsport. Now, if you haven't heard of Nodens except via Lovecraft, Nodens is a Celtic god, actually Nuada of the Silver Hand. Now, let me explain why my Nodens looks like it does. When I was making my first Elder God figure, Nodens, I knew that Nodens shows up in a seashell, at least in Lovecraft stories. He rides a seashell, right? I didn't want to make it look like a regular seashell. I didn't want to make an old weirdo in a robe. I wanted him to be interesting and creepy and non-human. So I had the idea that his shell would actually be an ammonite shell. You notice that it curves around like this. It's not a snail shell. They'll go the other way. It's an ammonite shell. He's in that, and I said, Elder Gods don't have tentacles. That was another rule. Elder Gods don't have tentacles. Because they're elder, I wanted to look like mummified and sear and dried up. So Nodens has, like, instead of tentacles, there's like arms reaching out from his thing. If you go back and look at Bastet, she's a mummified cat. I like this feel for the Elder Gods, so they're clearly distinguished from the Great Old Ones, which have tentacles. Now, hilariously, Nodens is also the god of dogs. I'll bet Lovecraft didn't know that. Anyway, Lovecraft really liked Nodens for some reason. I mean, put him in 2 stories. And because Nodens is not portrayed as wholly malign in these stories, some later authors decided that the Elder Gods were opposed to the Great Old One and in fact imprisoned them. This is kind of a pretty big leap to me to assume that because Nodens helps out Randolph Carter against Nyarlathotep at the end of the Dream Quest, that Nodens is a good guy. Especially since Nodens is called the Lord of the Great Abyss, and abysses in Lovecraft are never anything good. Anyway, in my opinion, there's not much evidence for Nodens actually being our pal. At best, he's neutral to us. We do have the Elder Sign, which is defensive in some ways, but the Elder Sign doesn't necessarily mean it's from the Elder Gods. A lot of these words go used and reused. The Elder Sign could come from somewhere else. Plus, Elder Signs are not any more common than the famous Starstone. And a lot of people assume that the Starstones have the Elder Sign on them. Maybe they do, who knows? But anyway, so let's go on to Hypnos. So Hypnos is a primordial Greek deity. It's the god of sleep. Ominously, he's the brother of death. He's not one of the regular Olympians of the 12. He appears in Lovecraft's short story Hypnos, in which a pair of hipsters basically use drugs to explore the outer reaches of experience, and they come to a Lovecraftian end. Hypnos is not portrayed as consciously seeking the doom of the heroes. I mean, they destroy themselves. But Hypnos is mocking, insatiate. He's certainly an entity of fear. So the interesting things about all these Elder Gods is that they are not invented by Lovecraft, at least not as gods. They actually belong to ancient pantheons. Bastet's Egyptian, Nodens is Celtic, and Hypnos is Greek. Now, there's no indication in the stories that any of the other gods in these pantheons exist or are anything except for pagan myths. But there's some stories where it might be possible. For example, in Lovecraft's story, The Temple and the Moon Bog, ancient Greek gods seem to possibly be involved in the horrors that ensue. In fact, in The Temple, which by the way takes place underwater, pretty great, a small ivory sculpture of a youthful head figures prominently, and Hypnos is portrayed as a head in his story. There's also the story, the horror Red Hook, which I really like, but it usually goes overlooked. HPL Historical Society has a cool radio drama that you can look at, but the horror Red Hook has references to the Roman Magna Mater, as does Rats in the Walls. It talks about the hideous Greek baby-eating monster Mormo, and it mentions Gorgo, who has a great name, but apparently is just a cursed queen of Sparta. But no gods actually show up in the horror Red Hook, or for that matter, Rats in the Walls. They're just like people worship them. My predilection is to say that in general, I don't think all the mythical gods were elder gods. I think there's maybe one or two actual elder gods per pantheon, of ancient thing. And that also must be an old and odd god that doesn't really fit in. Like, the ancient Greeks knew Hypnos was a real thing, so they kind of squoze him into their pantheon, but most of it is just Greek myths. So never a pantheon leader. And of course, those who devote themselves to the elder gods often find terrible dooms. Right. So anyway, the elder gods will no doubt mysteriously doom me if I spend too much time on them, so let's move along. The Great Ones. The Great Ones are mostly only talked about in the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, and they are clearly not super powerful. They are a lot like some of the ancient Norse and Greek gods. They're human-like, they can breed with us, they're weak enough that a really strong human can outmatch them. They maintain their power by virtue of something called the Other Gods, which Azathoth is mentioned as, who for some reason supports them. They are clearly not the Elder Gods, because Nodens is not one of them. There might be a lot of these things. The doomed city of Sarnath had 3, Loban, Tamash, and Zokalar. You may have heard of Hagar, Grionis, and Karakal. I actually invented those. Now they're on Wikipedias and stuff. I wanted some elder gods that didn't look like people. So in my Dreamland book of scenarios, which I think is still in print, we added the Roman god of fungus, Robagus, a great one, again, as a cool encounter in the underworld. So they're small, lesser gods that kind of just like hang out in the dreamlands. They don't really do much. They're just there and they're strong. Now, do these entities show up in the real world? Well, maybe. S.T. Yoshi thinks that the tale, The Other Gods, in which the Great Ones appear, is in our old world's distant past, not in the Dreamlands. In any case, the Great Ones don't seem to have much power today. My guess is that all the Great Ones in our world are dead by modern times, though their ghosts or shadows keep going on in the Dreamlands. I have no idea where they came from. They are humanoid, which is unusual for a Lovecraftian thing. Perhaps they were formed out of the human collective subconscious, some kind of Jungian thing. We know that Nyarlathotep doesn't respect Forum, but still protects and preserves them. So perhaps their continued existence is somehow useful to his purposes? Now, we know the Gugs got driven underground in the Dreamlands because they offended the gods. My guess is that it's these Great Ones that are the gods that are anti-Gug. I can't see anything that the Gugs would do that would offend the other gods. I mean, they're mindless, right? So what about the other gods? These are mentioned in several Dreamland stories. Usually they mention that they're gods of the outer hells. Outer space, they're terrifying. You go to space to see them. Azathoth is plainly one of them, as is Nyarlathotep. But this leads us directly to the Outer Gods. Now, the Outer Gods might just be another name for the other gods. I don't know. The Outer Gods are cosmic entities of surpassing power and may represent or be connected to the nature of the universe. I'm not going to cover them all in detail because they deserve their own videos, but Azathoth symbols the mindless, blind, yet malign universe, or some authors have said he's the personification of the Big Bang. Yog-Sothoth is said to be conterminous with all space and time, but on the other hand, he needs help to get back to Earth in the Dunwich Horror, so there's something we're not getting here. Shub-Niggurath is also an outer god, some kind of distorted fertility goddess. Maybe she's core to the universe and she's the reason that living things can reproduce at all. Just as Yog-Sothoth might be responsible for time being linear, which has all kinds of results, and so forth. Now, Nyarlathotep is said to be the soul and mind of the outer gods, but his personality is really dire, maybe reflecting his masters. There's at least one author who thinks that Nyarlathotep is not a separate entity, but just like a combined telepathic impression. I think he's a real thing with a separate entity. Lovecraft really thinks so. In any case, the outer gods, if they're not the other gods, are of cosmic universal significance. This doesn't mean they can't be thwarted. It happens all the time. Perhaps this is a side effect of them following different rules than a normal being, and those different rules are what screw them up. Now, the best known of Lovecraft's god-lover beings are the Great Old Ones. Now, this is kind of a confusing name because they're also sometimes called Old Ones, as are the star-headed things from below. Lovecraft says, the Old Ones were, the Old Ones are, and the Old Ones shall be. Not in the spaces we know, but between them they walk serene and primal, undimensioned and to us unseen. Yog-Sothoth knows the gate. Yog-Sothoth is the gate. Yog-Sothoth is the key and guardian of the gate. Past, present, future, all are one in Yog-Sothoth. He knows where the Old Ones broke through of old, and where they shall break through again. He knows where they have trod earth's fields, and where they still tread them, and why no one can behold them as they tread. By their smell, which I seem to be spelling now, can men sometimes know them near, but of their semblance can no man know. Also, you can see here that despite the fact that Yog-Sothoth is clearly said to be an outer god in another text, here he is an old one. And in fact, in this same section, it says, Cthulhu is their cousin, yet can he spy them only dimly. So is Cthulhu not an old one? That doesn't make sense. The elder things are called old and that's the same thing. It's not clear. My approach in my game, Cthulhu Wars, was simple. It is clear that the various Great Old Ones are not buddies, don't have the same origins. I think that Great Old One is not a category, not a pantheon, but it's a power level. If you're this tall, you get to be a Great Old One. If you have near cosmic power, whether you're born with it or you acquired it or whatever, you become a Great Old One. Let me give you two examples. We know the Starspawn are not Great Old Ones, but they're super powerful. They fought wars with the Old Ones, they fought wars with the Fungi from Yuggoth, they fought wars with the Ithians. It's not clear if they were ever defeated. They were sometimes fought to a standstill, so not all powerful. Of course, I don't think humans would do as well against them, but Cthulhu is explicitly a member of the Starspawn, their high priest, and he is also a Great Old One. Clearly, individual Starspawn can be this powerful at times, or possibly grow to this. Other super powerful Starspawn we know about are Ghatanothoa, Cthulhu, Zothamog, Coinchan, and others. These are described as having different abilities from each other, which makes sense if they grow into this status over time. So Cthulhu, for instance, doesn't have Ghatanothoa's mummifying appearance, but of course Cthulhu's immense power more than makes up for it. I'm not sure exactly what Cthulhu and Coinchan have going for them, but probably something. That's one example of a Great Old One. A very different example is the King in Yellow, who is an avatar or an offshoot or a shadow of the unspeakable. I don't think the king evolved from a lower form, and if his body was originally a human's, his spirit and powers are from elsewhere. So here's two very different Great Old Ones, with very different backgrounds, but still Great Old Ones. In other words, being a Great Old One is like being a king, or a general, or a doctor, or something. It's like recognition of your prowess. It doesn't mean you're friends with other Great Old Ones. That said, you're doubtless aware of the other ones. You could work together to meet your goals, or compete. And I hope that clarifies things a little, and if it doesn't, it's because the texts we work with are also vague. I may have added to this vagueness because in my game, Cthulhu Wars, I classified all the different entities, no matter what they were, as Great Old Ones. Just like jumping in together. So Azathoth is a Great Old One, whatever. It's more of it was for ease, so I didn't have to have two different words. So I apologize for that. But I do know the difference, sort of, as much as anyone can. And there you go. I hope this reduces some people's confusion, might add to others. But maybe that's the intent. These are creatures of an entity level and an origin that maybe humans can't understand, which is the point.